Indiana Fever stepped onto the court against the Atlanta Dream. No one could have predicted the heart-stopping twist that would decide their fate. For nearly 10 years, fans had waited for a moment to believe in again, and just when it seemed the season might slip away, a player struggling all night suddenly rose into history. With one daring move, Lexie Hull turned down into destiny, silencing an arena and reviving a franchise. But what exactly happened in those unforgettable seconds? This is that incredible story from shadows to spotlight. For nearly a decade, the Indiana Fever lived in the long shadow of their own history. Once celebrated as a franchise built on toughness and tradition, their glory years, led by the legendary Tamika Catchings, had become a distant memory, fading like echoes in a silent arena. In her prime, Catchings embodied everything the Fever stood for: resilience, grit, and the ability to will a team into greatness. But when she stepped away, the foundation cracked. The dynasty she built crumbled, leaving a team that once struck fear in its rivals struggling to find its identity again. Watching the Fever's decline was painful for fans who remembered their glory days. Once feared playoff contender, the team slipped into a cycle of disappointment and shattered hopes. Injuries tore through rosters, forcing constant lineup changes that prevented chemistry from forming. Young draft picks, some promising, some untested, were asked to carry enormous burdens, balancing personal growth with the city's desperate expectations. Every season began with hope, only to collapse, leaving supporters longing for the return of Indiana's true greatness. Fans who had once packed arenas with roaring energy were left restless, hearts heavy from waiting. The sea of yellow and navy that once represented joy became a reminder of struggle. An entire generation of young Fever supporters had never witnessed their team win a playoff series. Their only understanding of Indiana's greatness came from highlight reels and stories passed down, tales of a time when the Fever were unshakable. The last time Indiana advanced this far was in 2015. Tamika Catchings was still the beating heart of the team. Natasha Howard was just beginning to make her mark in the league, and Stephanie White was serving in her very first stint as head coach. It was a different era, full of promise, fight, and the weight of championship dreams. The years that followed, however, stripped away that sense of inevitability, replacing it with endless rebuilding and unanswered questions. By 2024, the Indiana Fever's unexpected rise shocked everyone. Their roster, already fragile, faced major setbacks. Rookie sensation Caitlin Klee marked the league's newest star, was sidelined. Veteran sharpshooter Sophie Cunningham, brought in to provide experience and scoring, was out, and young forward Chloe Bibby, still finding her footing, had also joined the injury list. Against this backdrop, it seemed the basketball gods had conspired against them. Yet in the face of mounting obstacles, the Fever's determination would soon defy all expectations. To make matters worse, frustration from earlier in the series still lingered. Questionable officiating and key moments had left players and fans alike feeling cheated, as though they were fighting the battles at once, one against their opponent and one against the whistle, and now they faced the ultimate test, a decisive road matchup against the Atlanta Dream, a team brimming with confidence, convinced this was their season to rise. On paper, Indiana had little chance. They were short-handed, emotionally drained, and walking into an arena filled with fans eager to watch their downfall. Yet it was under these exact circumstances that something unforgettable happened. The Fever, tired of waiting, tired of being underestimated, reached deep into themselves. Every setback, every injury, every moment of doubt had built to this. From shadows of despair, the Fever rose, rewriting destiny through relentless resilience. But was this victory just a spark or the beginning of a lasting fire? And could the Fever's defiance against all odds reshape the future of their franchise? Or was this unforgettable triumph merely the first chapter of a greater comeback? Let's dive deeper into the story. Undermanned but unbreakable, Indiana's gut check moment. Win or go home. Few phrases in sports carry as much weight And for the Indiana Fever, those words were not just motivation, they were survival. As they entered Game 3 against the Atlanta Dream, the reality was harsh. They weren't simply underdogs. They were a wounded team limping into battle with a roster that looked more like a patchwork crew than a polished playoff contender. Caitlin Clark, the rookie who had electrified the league and drawn national attention, was sidelined. Sophie Cunningham, known for her fiery spirit and long-range shooting, was out. Young forward Chloe Bibby, another vital piece of the rotation, was unavailable. What remained was a thin lineup stitched together not by star power, but by hard grit and an unshakable belief in one another. On paper, the matchup was no contest. Analysts dismissed their chances, pundits wrote them off, and even casual fans treated Indiana as an afterthought. Most believed Atlanta had the upper hand with a deeper roster and momentum on their side. But the Fever saw things differently. With nothing left to lose, they leaned into the freedom that comes with being underestimated. That absence of outside expectation didn't break them, it fueled them. The series itself had already been a roller coaster. In Game 1, frustration boiled over after a string of questionable whistles and a technical all on head coach Stephanie White. To the Fever, it felt like they were battling not just the dream, but also the officials, leaving them seething and determined to prove a point game. To brought desperation. With their backs against the wall, the players embraced a simple but powerful mantra: we are not going home. Those words weren't just shouted in huddles, they became a rallying cry echoing in every possession and every defensive stand. That mindset carried them into the decisive Game 3 played in Atlanta as roaring Gateway Center Arena. Nearly 4,000 fans filled the building, their cheers swelling with every Fever misstep. The noise was relentless, a wall of sound designed to rattle Indiana into collapse. But instead of shrinking, the Fever leaned into the chaos. Each roar from the crowd only steeled their resolve. What made this game unforgettable wasn't just the circumstances stacked against them, it was how Indiana responded. They didn't play scared, they didn't fold under pressure. They fought with a collective fire that Atlanta hadn't prepared. For every dive for a loose ball, every defensive stop, and every extra pass spoke louder than the crowd. This wasn't a story about individual brilliance. It wasn't about one player putting the team on their back. It was about a group of athletes who, stripped of their stars and underestimated by nearly everyone, refused to give in. Their chemistry became their weapon, their resilience, their greatest strength. By the time the final minutes ticked away, the Fever had already rewritten the narrative. Game 3 wasn't just another contest, it was a declaration. Against doubt, against noise, against adversity, Indiana had shown the basketball world what it means to be unbreakable. This was more than survival, it was defiance. And in that moment, the Indiana Fever proved that sometimes the most dangerous team is the one with nothing left to lose. From underdogs to unbreakable, the Fever showed that defiance can rewrite destiny. Yet how far can unity, resilience, and sheer willpower carry Indiana's reborn franchise? Let's uncover the answers in their passion, their purpose, and their relentless fight. The roar of Atlanta versus the resilience of Indiana. The Gateway Center Arena in Atlanta was more than just a venue on that decisive night. It was a cauldron of noise, pressure, and expectation. Nearly 4,000 fans packed the stands, creating a deafening wall of sound that pulsed with every dribble, whistle, and shot. It was hostile territory, and the mission of the Atlanta Dream faithful was clear: rattle the Indiana Fever, break their rhythm, and end their season. Every misstep by Indiana was met with cheers as loud as thunder, every turnover amplified into a storm designed to intimidate. But Indiana refused to be shaken. Instead of crumbling under the weight of the moment, they drew strength from it. Noise with composure, chaos with calm, and pressure with poise. The louder the arena grew, the stronger the Fever's resolve became. Their plays began to echo louder than the crowd, sending a message that they weren't there to bow out quietly, they were there to fight. At the center of it all was Kelsey Mitchell, the heartbeat of the Fever. From the opening tip, she played as though every possession carried the weight of history. Mitchell attacked with fearless energy, carving up the Dream's defense and refusing to be contained by halftime. She had already piled up 19 of her 24 total points, delivering dagger after dagger through step-backs, flow doors, and fearless drives into double teams. Her performance wasn't just about scoring, it was a bold declaration. Every shot made said, "We are still here. We are not backing down." While Mitchell provided the fire, Aaliyah Boston gave the Fever their anchor, facing the brute strength and size of Brianna Jones. Boston stood firm. She refused to be moved in the paint, battling for position, grabbing rebounds, and orchestrating plays with maturity far beyond her years. Her stat line, 14 points, 12 rebounds, and 6 assists, told the story of balance and reliability. But her impact was deeper than numbers. Each rebound gave Indiana fresh belief. Each assist created an opportunity. Boston's poise steadied the Fever, transforming pressure into confidence. Surrounding the team stars, the veterans became the engine driving Indiana's heartbeat. Odyssey Sims dominated every corner of the court, reading defenses, threading clever passes, and stepping up to score when the moment demanded. Her 16 points and 8 assists, showcasing both skill and versatility. Beside her, Natasha Howard epitomized relentless determination, diving for loose balls, tipping rebounds back into play, and igniting energy wherever it was needed. Their contributions went beyond stats. Each possession, each spark of effort fueled the Fever's fight and resilience. And then there were the so-called role players who refused to accept that label on this night. Brianna Turner stepped into defensive gaps whenever foul trouble threatened to derail the Fever's plan. Her presence a quiet but crucial safety net. Aerial Powers added bursts of electricity off the bench, sparking momentum shifts with her energy, her scoring, and her visible passion that reignited the Fever's body language. Together, they reminded everyone that this was a team where every contribution mattered. Every player, from the stars to the supporting cast, carved their name into the narrative. In a game built on adversity, the Fever showed that victory is never just about talent, it is about collective will. On that unforgettable night in Atlanta, Indiana proved no role was too small and no moment too big, but who truly stole the spotlight. And was that steal simply a clutch play or the spark of a franchise legend in the making? Now, let's unravel how one unlikely defensive masterstroke forever rewrote the Fever's future. A moment for the ages. Every so often in sports, a single play rises above the noise of stats, highlights, and headlines to become something timeless, a moment that lives in memory long after the scoreboard goes dark. For the Indiana Fever, that moment came from a player who for most of the night couldn't seem to catch a break. Lexie Hull had battled through a nightmare shooting performance. Shot after shot bounced off the rim, wide open looks slipped away, jumpers that normally fell with ease betrayed her under the bright playoff lights. Each miss weighed heavily, and it seemed her confidence with the ball was fading. For many players, such a night would have meant retreat, shying away from touches, letting frustration win. But Hull chose another path. If our offense wasn't working, she would pour herself into defense with unshakable determination. Play after play, she locked in, she shadowed her assignment, fought through screens, and refused to give an inch. Her defense wasn't glamorous, but it was suffocating, the kind that wears opponents down. She stayed patient, waiting, believing that her chance would come, and then in the final seconds, it did. With less than 30 seconds on the clock, Indiana trailed by 1. Their season hung by a thread. Kelsey Mitchell, carrying the team all night, had just delivered a clutch layup off a perfect feed from Aaliyah Boston. It kept the Fever alive. But it wasn't enough. Atlanta still had the ball, still had the advantage. All they needed was one clean inbound, one safe possession, and Indiana's inspiring run would end in heartbreak. But Hull was ready as the ball left the inbounder his hands. She read the play instantly, as if she had seen it unfold before. She anticipated the pass, lunged forward, and in a single fluid motion snatched it clean out of the air. The arena gasped. Nearly 4,000 fans who had been roaring seconds earlier fell into stunned silence. What they had expected to be Atlanta's finishing touch had suddenly become Indiana's lifeline. That steal didn't just shift the possession, it flipped the game, the series, and perhaps even the trajectory of the franchise. Indiana capitalized, turning Hull's moment of brilliance into the basket that sealed the win. When the final buzzer sounded, the Fever weren't just survivors, they were semifinalists. For Hull, the irony was striking on a night when her shots betrayed her. She had found salvation in defense. The very part of the game that rarely makes headlines had delivered her the biggest headline of her career. Her defining play wasn't a buzzer-beating three-pointer or a flashy drive to the hoop. It was a defensive masterpiece born of discipline, instinct, and refusal to quit. That one steal instantly became etched into Fever history. Fans knew they had witnessed more than just a highlight. They had seen the kind of play that defines errors. How the player who couldn't buy a basket all night had delivered the defensive play of the decade. From that night on, her name wasn't merely written on the roster, it was etched into Indiana Fever history. But who truly is Lexie Hull beyond that unforgettable steal? And is hers a story of chasing the spotlight or quietly redefining greatness? Now let's uncover how a relentless underdog carved her legacy and redefined what it means to shine. From quiet beginnings to the defining steal, Lexie Hull's story is not the tale of a player born into the spotlight. It is the story of someone who carved her way into it slowly, steadily, and with a kind of quiet determination that often goes unnoticed in the fast-moving world of professional sports. While many athletes make headlines with viral highlights or flashy plays, Hull built her career brick by brick with precision, grit, and discipline that demanded respect. Her beginnings in Spokane Valley, Washington were not filled with fanfare. She and her twin sister Lexie spent countless hours in local gyms sharpening their skills, not for the cameras, but for the love of the game. In those moments away from the roar of crowds have developed the foundation of her game: defense grounded in awareness, shooting guided by patience, and leadership shaped by humility. It was never about noise or ego, it was about consistency. That same consistency carried her to Stanford University, where she would emerge as one of the most dependable players of her generation. At Stanford, the expectations were enormous: championships with the standard, not the dream. Hull rose to the challenge game after game. She showcased a mix of sharp basketball intelligence and a relentless work ethic. Her numbers might not always have jumped off the page, but her impact was undeniable. She brought balance to the team, providing the kind of stability coaches crave and teammates cherish. Her journey at Stanford also reflected something deeper: the idea that greatness isn't always loud. Hull balanced academics and athletics with remarkable poise, graduating from one of the most demanding institutions in the country, while still chasing excellence on the court. For her, discipline wasn't a burden, it was a way of life. And in a world where many athletes are pushed to focus solely on their sport, Hull's ability to thrive in both arenas marked her as exceptional. Through her championship run with the Stanford Cardinals, she built a legacy defined not only by trophies, but also by the values she carried. With her intelligence, integrity, and unshakable focus alongside her sister Lexie, she demonstrated the strength of a bond and family, proof that basketball for her was never just about individual glory, but about connection, teamwork, and shared purpose. When Hull entered the WNBA, she didn't arrive as the most hyped rookie in the league. She wasn't the one plastered across billboards or dominating highlight reels. But quietly, she began to earn the same respect she had always pursued. Coaches praised her reliability, teammates trusted her commitment, and opponents learned the hard way that underestimating her would come at a price. Her defining moment, the iconic steal against the Atlanta Dream, did not happen in a vacuum. It was the culmination of years of habits, preparation, and mentality. Hull's instinct to anticipate, her willingness to sacrifice for defense, and her refusal to fold under pressure all reflected the journey that had shaped her. It wasn't luck, it was a legacy. Lexie Hull's rise was never about chasing the spotlight, it was about earning it. But was her unforgettable steal simply one shining moment, or the spark that reshaped the destiny of a franchise, and as a team or the Fever truly prepared for what lies ahead? Yeah, let's delve into the details from tears to triumph. When the buzzer sounded, it wasn't just victory, it was freedom. A decade of heartbreak and false hopes vanished in an instant. The Indiana Fever were no longer the team trapped by disappointment. They were survivors who had finally broken their chains. In the locker room, emotions erupted without filter. Tears, laughter rang, disbelief lingered, and joy surged all at once. It was a release so powerful words could never fully capture its weight. Kelsey Mitchell, the steady heartbeat of the franchise, stood at the center of it all. For years, she had carried the burden of losing seasons, the doubts of critics, and the responsibility of being the face of a struggling team. Now, as the celebration roared around her, she couldn't hold back her emotions. Tears streamed as she realized that her persistence had finally paid off. She had waited for this moment longer than anyone else, and the triumph felt deeply personal. Across the room, Aaliyah Boston sat in quiet. A rookie only a year ago, she now found herself as one of the anchors of a team that had ended a 10-year drought. Her stat line from the night told one story, but her expression told another, the look of a young star who had stepped into history and was only beginning to understand the weight of it. She hadn't just played in the victory, she had helped shape it. And then there was Lexie Hull. Her shooting night had been rough, but her defining steal had rewritten everything. Now clutching the game ball like it was a priceless relic, she knew she had just authored a legacy moment, the kind of play that children would one day reenact in driveways and gyms, the kind of moment that would live in Fever law forever, even without S.